The conquest that changed the world. What if I told you one of the greatest empires in human history didn't fall because of swords, but because of sickness? When the Spanish arrived in the Americas, they didn't just bring soldiers and steel. They brought invisible killers that wiped out entire civilizations before battles even began. This isn't just a story about conquest. It's a story about disease, betrayal, and how the modern world was born out of collapse. When people imagine the Spanish conquest of the Americas, they usually picture brutal battles, shining armor, and swords cutting down entire civilizations. But the truth is far darker and far more complicated. Most indigenous people in the Americas were not killed by Spanish weapons. They were killed by something invisible: disease. When Europeans arrived in the late 1400s and early 1500s, they unknowingly carried smallpox, measles, influenza, and typhus. These diseases had existed in Europe for centuries. Survivors often carried immunity. Indigenous populations had none. The result was catastrophic. In some regions, up to 90% of the population died within decades, often before major battles even happened. Entire villages vanished without a single sword being drawn. Leaders died, farmers died, knowledge keepers died, societies collapsed from the inside out, families disappeared, trade networks collapsed, crops went unharvested, famine followed disease, and violence followed famine. By the time Spanish soldiers arrived, many communities were already weakened, grieving, and struggling to survive. This wasn't just conquest by force, it was conquest by biology. Nowhere is this clearer than in the story of Hernán Cortés. Cortés landed on the coast of present-day Mexico in 1519 with fewer than 1,000 men. On paper, he should have stood no chance against the mighty Aztec Empire, which ruled millions. But Cortés understood something critical. The Aztecs were not universally loved. Many surrounding tribes resented Aztec rule. Heavy tribute demands and constant warfare. Entire communities were forced to surrender food, labor, and captives. Resistance often meant destruction. Cortés exploited these tensions, forming alliances with indigenous groups who saw the Spanish as a chance to overthrow their oppressors. Thousands of indigenous warriors fought alongside the Spanish. This was not a simple story of Europeans versus natives. It was a tangled web of politics, survival, and desperation. Without these alliances, Cortés almost certainly would have failed. Early encounters between the Spanish and the Aztecs were filled with confusion and misunderstanding. Some Aztec nobles believed Cortés might be the returning god Quetzalcoatl, a legendary figure associated with prophecy and return. This belief didn't come from ignorance, it came from shock. Steel weapons, firearms, horses, none of these existed in Mesoamerica. To someone seeing a mounted soldier for the first time, it could appear as though the man and horse were a single creature, something out of myth rather than reality. But that illusion shattered quickly. Once violence began, it became clear the Spaniards were not gods. They were conquerors. Spanish soldiers carried steel swords, metal armor, and firearms. Indigenous warriors used obsidian blades, wooden shields, and cotton armor, effective in their own context, but no match for steel. Horses gave the Spanish speed, height, and terror as a psychological weapon. Cavalry charges devastated forces that had never faced anything like them before. Cannons and gunfire added thunder and smoke to the battlefield, spreading fear even when they failed to hit their targets. But weapons alone did not win the war. Disease continued to spread through cities and villages, killing rulers and generals without warning. Entire command structures collapsed overnight. Armies disintegrated before they could even fight. The battlefield was already broken. When the Spanish first laid eyes on Tenochtitlan, they were stunned. Built on an island in a vast lake, the city featured canals, causeways, massive temples, clean streets, and advanced sanitation systems. Fresh water flowed through aqueducts. Markets fed tens of thousands every single day. It was larger and more organized than most European cities of the time. Spanish soldiers compared it to Venice, and some said it was even more impressive. Within 2 years, it was gone. After a brutal siege marked by starvation, disease, and relentless fighting, Tenochtitlan fell in 1521. The city was dismantled stone by stone and rebuilt as Mexico City, the center of Spanish colonial rule. A civilization's heart was erased and replaced. And this pattern didn't stop in Mexico. Further south, the Spanish repeated the process against the Inca Empire. Disease had already killed the emperor. Civil war weakened leadership. Spanish forces exploited the chaos. Once again, conquest came not just from swords, but timing, betrayal, and disease. The Spanish conquest relied heavily on fear, public executions, burnings, mutilations, mass punishments. These acts were not random cruelty, they were strategy. The goal was to make resistance feel impossible. One public execution could force an entire region to surrender without a fight. Stories of violence traveled faster than soldiers ever could, breaking morale long before battles began. Conquest was not only about land and gold, it was also about religion. Priests traveled with soldiers, tasked with converting indigenous populations to Christianity. In theory, conversion was meant to save souls. In practice, it was often forced. Refusal could mean imprisonment, torture, or death. Sacred temples were destroyed and replaced with churches. Indigenous beliefs were labeled evil or demonic. Cultural practices were erased or driven underground. Religion became another weapon of control. After conquest came exploitation. Indigenous people were forced into brutal labor systems, mining silver, farming plantations, and constructing colonial cities. Workloads were extreme. Food was scarce. Disease never stopped spreading. Entire communities were drained of their population. Death became routine. The Spanish obsession with gold and silver reshaped global history. Mines in the Americas poured enormous wealth into Europe, fueling empires, global trade, and early capitalism. But there was a cost. The sudden influx of wealth caused massive inflation. Prices soared, wages stagnated, inequality deepened. What was taken from the Americas didn't just change Spain, it changed the entire world. Many indigenous groups who helped the Spanish believed they would gain freedom once the Aztecs fell. Instead, they were betrayed. Land was seized, people were enslaved, former allies were treated little better than conquered enemies. Promises were broken, survival replaced hope. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of the conquest is what can never be recovered. Languages vanished, oral histories were silenced. Entire belief systems disappeared within a single generation. So much was lost so quickly that historians will never fully understand what existed before. The Spanish conquest of the Americas wasn't a single event. It was a chain reaction of disease, fear, alliances, and destruction that reshaped the modern world. And the truth is, we're still living with its consequences today. If you want more real history like this, the kind that isn't sugar-coated, like the video, subscribe, and comment which part of this story shocked you the most. And if you think this was intense, wait until you hear what happened next.